There's a moment when every human being stops pretending, when the carefully built facade begins to crack, and we're forced to look at what hides underneath. Most of us turn away. We drown that glimpse in distraction, in work, in pleasure, in the soft hum of the world that keeps us from listening too closely. But deep down, you already know. What you fear most isn't the world outside. It's the one inside your head. We're told monsters are born in the dark, the creatures that stalk the night, the shadows that breathe under the bed. But what if the darkness isn't outside at all? What if it lives inside us, quiet, intelligent, and patient? The mind is a vast landscape, filled with corridors we rarely visit. Some are bright, memories of love, of kindness, of innocence. But there are other corridors, ones we lock away. They are filled with thoughts we don't want to admit we have, urges we bury under morality, desires we silence with guilt. That's where the monster lives. You can feel it sometimes, can't you? That flicker of satisfaction when someone you envy fails? That spark of anger when someone challenges your control? That whisper that says you're better than them? We call it human nature, but it's older than that. It's survival instinct, stripped of empathy. Inside the mind of a monster, there is perfect logic. No chaos, no noise, only purpose. It's a place where emotion and morality are considered flaws, where empathy is weakness. And once you begin to think like that, even for a moment, the descent begins. We build our lives pretending to be good. But goodness isn't the absence of evil, it's the conscious fight against it. And most of us lose that fight in silence, long before we ever realize it began. Monsters don't announce themselves. They don't roar or crawl out of shadows. They whisper. They rationalize. They make sense. The man who manipulates others believes he's teaching them a lesson. The woman who humiliates others calls it honesty. The person who destroys others' peace calls it freedom. Each believes they're doing what's right. That's the trap. Evil always disguises itself as reason. If you've ever wondered how ordinary people commit unspeakable acts, that's how. They stop feeling and start explaining. Every atrocity begins with justification. The human mind is brilliant at rewriting its own history. We tell ourselves stories so we can live with what we've done. I had no choice. They deserved it. I was only protecting myself. Each phrase is a small brick in the architecture of self-deception, and eventually, that architecture becomes a prison. But inside the mind of a monster, it doesn't feel like a prison. It feels like freedom. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from empathy. Freedom from the unbearable weight of caring. When the monster takes over, the world stops being made of people. It becomes a field of objects, things to be used, controlled, erased, or ignored. The mind stops asking what's right and starts asking what works. And here's the terrifying truth. This transformation doesn't require a broken brain. It doesn't require madness. It only requires silence, the absence of reflection. Because when you stop confronting your own darkness, it begins to speak for you. Think of the people who have caused you pain, the betrayal, the cruelty, the indifference. Now imagine looking into their mind and realizing they don't think they're evil. They think they're right. They think you are the one who doesn't understand. That's the most chilling part of all. The monster doesn't hate you. It doesn't even care about you. It only seeks order, its order, in a world that no longer feels safe or fair. And when fear and control fuse together, compassion dies. History is filled with monsters who believed they were heroes. They looked in the mirror and saw not horror, but purpose. They justified everything in the name of some higher good, and their victims were simply the price of progress.
But what about you? What about the small cruelties you excuse? The moments you choose silence when you should have spoken? The times you let someone else bleed so you could stay clean? The monster doesn't need a body count. It only needs apathy. Most people think the opposite of love is hate. It isn't. The opposite of love is indifference, and indifference is the soil where monsters grow. Inside the human mind, there's always a battle. Empathy versus apathy. Self-awareness versus justification. The moment you stop questioning yourself, the monster wins. But here's the paradox. To destroy the monster, you first have to face it. And to face it, you have to admit that it's yours. When you look into your own darkness long enough, it stares back, not to frighten you, but to remind you that you're capable of both creation and destruction. That the monster isn't separate from you. It is you, stripped of restraint. Understanding this isn't an invitation to despair. It's the beginning of awakening. Because monsters can only thrive in ignorance. Once you see it, truly see it, it loses power. But most people don't want to see. They'd rather live blind and call it peace. So they project their monsters onto others, pointing fingers, naming enemies, burning witches. They do everything except the one thing that matters, looking inward. We fear monsters because they remind us of what we could become. We fear them because they reflect the side of us that wants to be free from guilt, free from empathy, free from humanity. We fear them because deep down, we understand them. And that understanding terrifies us more than any horror story ever could. What makes a monster is not its birth, but its choice. And most choices are made in silence, the quiet decisions that reshape the soul when no one is watching. Every monster begins as someone who was hurt. The difference is what they do with that pain. Some people carry their suffering with grace. They turn it into empathy, into understanding, into art. Others bury it deep until it rots. And when it rots, it poisons everything around them. Inside the mind of a monster, there's always a story of origin, a memory of humiliation, rejection, or betrayal that never healed. At first, the pain was unbearable. Then it became fuel, then identity. Because for some, it's easier to be feared than forgotten. The transformation doesn't happen in an instant. It happens through 1,000 tiny permissions. I deserve this. They made me this way. This is the only way to survive. And slowly, the boundary between self-defense and domination disappears. But here's the truth that no one wants to face. The monster doesn't destroy the person. The monster is the person, stripped of illusion, stripped of empathy, stripped of the comforting lies we tell ourselves about being good. That's why real monsters don't look different from anyone else. They look like your neighbor, your coworker, your reflection. Evil doesn't need fangs or claws. It just needs justification. The most terrifying part of understanding the human mind is realizing how thin the line is, how easily the desire to be understood can become the desire to control, how easily love can turn into possession, how easily pain can become purpose. Every human carries the same potential. The mind is both a temple and a weapon, and the difference lies in awareness. Awareness is what keeps the monster chained. Ignorance is what sets it free. When people talk about monsters, they often imagine something unrecognizable. But the truth is that monstrosity often wears the face of reason, of normalcy, of calm. Because when cruelty is quiet, it's harder to see and harder to fight. The world we live in rewards the traits that monsters perfect. Ambition without empathy, confidence without reflection, control without compassion. We call them leaders, geniuses, visionaries. We admire the results, but we never question the cost. So how do you escape the monster inside your own mind? You don't. You face it. You listen to it. Because what you fear the most may be the part of you that's begging to be understood. The monster inside you doesn't want destruction. It wants release. It wants to stop pretending. It wants you to stop lying. To yourself, to the world, to the mask you wear every day.
The first step toward redemption is confrontation. You have to look directly at the darkest part of yourself and say, I know you. And in that moment, the monster hesitates, because recognition is something it cannot survive. Most people never reach that moment. They spend their lives chasing noise, validation, distraction. They think peace means avoiding the darkness, when in truth, peace means walking through it without losing yourself. Monsters don't hide in the dark. They hide in denial. In every thought you refuse to face, in every feeling you suppress, in every moment you convince yourself you're incapable of harm. But awareness is a blade. Once you hold it, you can cut through illusion. You can begin to see the shadows not as enemies, but as echoes, fragments of what you used to be. That's how transformation begins. To live without ever facing your monster is to live half asleep. To face it is to wake up, trembling, afraid, but alive. Because in that awakening, something shifts. You realize that darkness is not the opposite of light. It's the space that gives light its meaning. Maybe that's the real lesson. The mind of a monster and the mind of a saint are not opposites. They are two directions in the same labyrinth, and the difference between them is not what they see, but what they choose to become after seeing it. If you've ever stared into the abyss of your own thoughts, if you've ever wondered what you're capable of when no one's watching, then you've already stepped inside that labyrinth. The question isn't whether you'll meet the monster. The question is whether you'll walk out as one. So ask yourself, not with fear, but with honesty, when was the last time you looked at your reflection without judgment? When was the last time you forgave yourself for being human? Because the monster feeds on guilt and shame, not evil. It grows in the absence of self-understanding. Inside the mind of a monster, there's always a mirror. And when you finally look into it, you might realize that what you thought was a curse was actually a call to awaken. The mind is capable of horror, but also of redemption. And maybe the purpose of confronting the monster isn't to destroy it, but to integrate it, to understand that it was never separate from you. It was your pain, your anger, your hunger for meaning, misunderstood, unloved, unseen. Every monster is born from neglect, not of others, but of the self. And when you begin to listen, when you begin to see, you start to take back what was lost, your humanity. If you've listened this far, it means you've already begun that process. You've looked into your own abyss, and you didn't look away. That takes courage most people will never know. So keep walking, keep questioning, keep seeing, because the mind that dares to look within is no longer controlled by the monster it once feared. And maybe that's what salvation really means. Not light without shadow, but balance, the harmony between both. So if this voice speaks to you, if you've ever felt the darkness whisper beneath your thoughts, if you've ever been afraid of what you might find inside your own mind, then remember this: the monster is not your enemy. It's the part of you waiting to be forgiven. And if this truth resonates, if it helps you see yourself in a different light, then stay. Subscribe. Join us here, within the abyss, because the real journey isn't escaping your mind. It's learning to live inside it without fear.